All right, welcome. This is the retake ticket for learning target A. We're looking at ways to prove triangles are congruent, shortcuts that we have. We have 5 of them. Side, 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 angle, side, hypotenuse, leg, angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. Now, the first step to any level, whether it's a C level, B level, or A level, is to identify what you know and then what you are going to be able to do with that. So I'm going to take a look at this first triangle here, and I prefer, or I like to label them with S's and A's. S being side and A being angle. We could have as many as 3 congruent sides. Probably not going to have 3 congruent angles, but maybe 2 congruent angles, and so I will label them with these letters. So looking at this first example, I've got a side 1 is congruent to side 1 over here. So I'm looking at the 2 different triangles and I'm matching up what I know in those triangles. Side 2 is going to be congruent to side 2 over here. And then the last piece, and this is kind of the step that is much like a proof but not quite in the 2 columns format, we need to recognize that these 2 sides are going to be congruent because of the reflexive property. And so we can simply put side 3 on that one, kind of side 3 on both sides, and it becomes pretty obvious once you label all of these things that the only choice we have, the only one of these examples that has 3 S's is got to be side, side, side. And so those are congruent by side, side, side. We'll continue to do this same pattern for all of these examples. All right. So moving to the right, I've got a side 1 is congruent to side 1 that has 1 congruent mark on it. We've got side 2 down here is congruent to side 2. Really, you could switch these around any way you want. If you prefer to put side 1 down here across from each other, it really doesn't matter. We know that side 2 is congruent to side 2. The last piece, though, of course, is that idea again that you've got to have congruent. What is congruent in here that's not labeled? And the answer is going to be these vertical angles right here. They're across from each other. Okay, reflexive sides and vertical angles are one of the more common pieces that you need to add in these C-level questions. And so I'm going to put an angle 1 here and an angle 1 here. Now, again, you go down to your list here and you say, okay, well, what do we know and which one could it be? Well, it obviously can't be any of these because I don't have 2 congruent angles. It's not HL because it's not a right triangle, so my only choice is side, angle, side. And again, it couldn't be side, side, side because we don't have 3 congruent sides. And so this one is side, angle, side. Let's go down to the bottom left triangle. We've got a right triangle. Now, I don't want you to assume that anytime you have a right triangle, it's HL. But it is a good spot to start. All right, start with HL when you see a right triangle, and then see if you have enough information. If you don't, then try something else. But in this situation, you'll see we do have enough information. So we've got a right triangle. All right, that's an important piece to proving that something is, in fact, hypotenuse leg. Okay, so we've got our right triangle. Just write that in there. My hypotenuse is the one across from the 90, and so we can draw an arrow from the 90 across, and then from the 90 across, that is our hypotenuse. And so we've got those 2 things are congruent, and all we need now is to have a leg, one of the sides that touch the 90, and I think that it's pretty obvious here that this will be a leg here, and this is a leg up top. And so for this example, we can use hypotenuse leg. All right. We'll continue to the right here, go back to the top. This is going to be one of the harder examples because you're only given really one thing is explicitly given to you, and that is our angle congruence here. Angle 1 is congruent to this angle 1 up here. But now we need to take it a step further and we need to look at what else are we given. Well, you should begin to start seeing these reflexive properties right away. Okay, so that's our side 1 here. We can put a side 1 over in the bottom triangle as well. The third piece is going to be one of the harder ones, and it's about parallel lines. I like to extend my parallel lines. I feel like this helps me to identify what it is I'm looking at, and also the transversal. It kind of brings it makes it look like the problems that we studied when we were looking at uh, parallel lines for the first time, dealing with transversals. So what do we know? Well, we've already got these two are congruent here, and so that's really not going to be part of it. Plus, those don't even touch the parallel line. But I do see that this angle here is congruent to this angle here. Those are alternate interior angles. Now, I can take away the red lines, and I have to move these angles maybe a little bit in, but you can see that these are our congruent angles, and that is going to be angle 2 here and then angle 2 up there. So now you've got to make the decision, all right? We, of course, only have two things left down here, angle side angle and angle angle side, but those are the only two that have two angles and one side. So your last decision here, after you've done all this work in finding things that are congruent, the last thing that you need to do is figure out, is the side between my two angles or is the side outside of the two angles? And so I look into just one of the triangles. If I just highlight this yellow triangle, all right, and I try to identify, all right, where are my two angles? So I'll highlight them here and this angle. That side is right between here, okay? That side is right between, connecting the two angles together. And so for this example, it has to be angle side angle. The S must be between the two A's. All right. Now our very last example, of course, is going to be angle angle side, but again, let's go through the examples here. The first thing that we can do is identify what we're given. I've got a couple of congruent segments here. So segment 1 is congruent to segment 1. I've got a vertical angle. All right, we always want to identify these vertical angles when we can, and so put congruent marks on this in the center here, this angle congruent to this angle, and we can put angle 1 on both sides there. Now, we've got parallel lines again, and if it's helpful for you, extend those out. Just trace them very lightly with your pencil. Extend this one out, and then choose a transversal. Okay? I am going to choose this as a transversal. Okay? And maybe if I lighten these, you can see both the triangles and the lines at the same time and begin to see kind of what the advantages of lightening the or drawing these out. Because now hopefully it becomes a little bit easier to see that these two angles here and here, those are alternate interior angles again. Right? And so we can label those accordingly as angle 2 and angle 2. All right, so you can lightly shade your triangles just as I did with my red lines, and hopefully extending them out will allow you to see those relationships a little bit easier, make it look like the original triangles we looked at, or the original parallel lines. All right, so now looking at what I have here, I've got two angles, angle 1, angle 2, and then a side. And the question, as always, is when you have two angles and a side, where is the side? That's what you have to look at. And if I highlight them again, you'll be able to see that here's an angle, and then the side that we're looking at is this one over here, not between the two angles, and so we would use angle, angle, side.